Hey everyone, I'm going to try to make this quick because the last time I tried to record this it was like 25 minutes long. But anyway, I have a few videos for you guys today, and this first one is Daniel Deronda, a Daniel Deronda review. Sorry. Anyway, yeah. So I finished this on the 31st of July. It took me a month and like a week or a month and 10 days, something like that. We'll say about 6 weeks, I guess. And I started reading this with Katie from Books and Things, and Ange from Beyond the Pages, and Alysia from Exlibris. And I was doing a really good job of keeping up with this buddy read for the first couple of days. But the funny thing is, Alysia and Ange were so far ahead of Katie and I. They were, I think they finished in like 5 days. And Katie and I were about halfway through when the 5 days was over. I think we were around the same. I may have been a little bit behind her, or she may have been a little bit behind me, but basically we were both significantly behind Alysia and Ange. And I was just like amazed by their power reading. But yeah, so they finished pretty early, and then Katie and I were pretty much on the same track, and I thought we were going to finish at the same time. But then the reason why I read even half of this book in like 5 days is because I was listening to it on audiobook. I was listening to the Juliet Stevenson narration, and I was doing that while I was cleaning, and I spent 5 days cleaning house in preparation for company. But then when the company got there, I just didn't have time to read, which was totally fine with me because, you know, I would prefer to visit with people. But yeah, so I didn't read for the entire time they were there, so then I got really behind, and then the next week I was visiting with my grandmother, so didn't read hardly at all that week. So then I just got to the point where I was like, okay, now all three of these other girls are finished with this book, so I'm just gonna read at my own pace. And it turns out that my own pace, when I'm not reading with other people, for giant books like this is about like a month. I don't know. So I read half of this in 5 days and half of this in a month. But anyway, I really loved it. I saw the other girls' reviews of this when they did their monthly wrap-ups, and I think that Ange and Katie and I liked it a little bit more than Alysia did. I don't remember. I think she had issues with the main character, Daniel, and also she said that the religious stuff parts of the book were pretty boring. And I don't know if she just had issues with Daniel or if she just didn't like the character, but I think, as I said, that Katie and Ange and I all liked it a little bit more. I freaking loved it. I gave it a 5. Yeah, pretty much a 5. I might, like, dock it a quarter of a star just because it did take me forever to read the second half. But I want to say that that was more just me, not really the book, although I will say there are some parts in here that tend to go on a bit. Because it is a 900-page book, so, of course. But as you can tell, I totally loved it, because look at all the sticky tabs. I probably have maybe like 100 tabs in here. Maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration. Maybe it's like 75 or so. Actually, I think I counted, and I think it was like 90-something, so yeah, a lot. And I did not even try to color code this. I just grabbed whatever colored tab I could find, so there's multiple colors. But yes, okay, so for non-spoilery things, I will just read you guys the back of this. It says, George Eliot's last, most controversial novel opens as the spoiled Gwendolyn Harleth, poised at a roulette table, about to throw away a small fortune, captivates Daniel Deronda. As their lives become intertwined, they are also transformed by suffering, misfortune, revelations, and Daniel's fascination with the Jewish singer Mira. Daniel Deronda shocked Victorian readers with its portrayal of the Jewish experience in British society and remains a moving and epic portrayal of human passions. So yeah, that's the synopsis. And for non-spoilery things, I'm pretty sure I can just tell you in general how I felt about a lot of the characters. It was odd. I was kind of on the fence about Gwendolyn. There were times, and like some of this I do have to talk about in the spoilery section, but just non-spoilery reasons I didn't like her. She was very self-centered in the beginning, and like it was to the point where at one point there's something unfortunate that happens to one of her cousins, and she laughs about it, and it's not like oh, like I took a small tumble. Like, he ends up getting in a horse riding accident where he dislocates his shoulder, and when he goes and talks to her about it, or when she goes to see him, she is laughing, and she's like, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be laughing, but she's like laughing at him, at his injury, and I was like, that's not really cool or nice, or, no. And I really didn't like the way she treated her mother and just everyone around her. Like, she basically acted in the beginning like the world was there to please her. Like, everyone in the world was around her to please her, and if she wasn't pleased, then she was vexed. And it just... she really bothered me in the beginning. And then something happens to her, where she's just in a very difficult situation for a lot of the book. I'm not going to say what, because I feel like that's a spoiler. But yeah, she's in a very difficult situation for the majority of this book, and that situation is how she ends up growing and changing and becoming not so selfish, and also through knowing Daniel. Gosh, I wish that there could have been a different way for her to grow and mature and become a better person, because I absolutely hate the situation that she gets in, and I would never wish that on anyone, and it was so incredibly miserable to read about. Like, it was, oh my gosh, it was awful. But that's basically how she changes in the book, and I ended up really liking her at the end, and I really like how her situation was resolved. I'll kind of talk about that more in the spoilery section, but yeah, so that's how I ended up sort of liking her character at the end. And at the end, you could tell that there was still some things that she needed to learn about life and everything, but she was finally, at the end, she finally starts to focus on people around her rather than just herself, and I really loved that about her character. So, next characters, I'll get the people I didn't like out of the way, I guess. Gwendolyn's mom was another character I was sort of on the fence about. I just thought she had a very kind of weak personality, and she wasn't a bad character, but she seemed very one-dimensional to me, and also I really, really didn't like the way that Gwendolyn treated her, but I also didn't like that she let Gwendolyn treat her that way. She didn't seem like a very strong-willed character, I'll say. So, yeah, I had some issues with the mom, but it's almost like at the end I sort of had basically an indifference for her. Like, I didn't really care for her, but I didn't really not like her. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, so I was pretty indifferent to her character. I liked Mrs. Merrick. Mrs. Merrick is Daniel's best friend Hans's mother. She was cool. I thought she kind of sometimes put her foot in her mouth a bit, but overall I thought she was a very kind-hearted lady. And same with Hans's sisters, Mrs. Merrick's daughters. Hans was a character who I quite liked until the towards the end of the story, and I had a much bigger problem with his character in the adaptation than I did in the book, and I'll talk about that again in the spoiler section. So yeah, Hans was he was nice, but some of his intentions were not intentions, but some of his actions and words, I was just like, nope, sorry. So yeah, he was kind of a little bit liked him, a little bit didn't like him at some points. Hugo Mallinger is Daniel's uncle, and or is he his uncle? No, he's his adoptive father. And Hugo Mallinger is a character who I really liked for the majority of the story, until like a little bit towards the end, and there's an issue. I have an issue with him at the end, but it wasn't a big enough issue that I ended up not liking his character. So I quite liked his character, but I didn't like one of his actions at the end. And I was talking about, or trying to talk about people I hated, and just ended up talking about people I didn't really was iffy about, and then people I actually liked. But anyway, characters that I legit hated. There were really only three who I really, really, really hated. One is Sir Henley Mallinger Grandcourt, he is Mr. Sir Hugo's nephew. And I'm not going to tell you what he has to do with the story, because I feel like that's a spoiler, but he is the scum of the earth. He is the worst, and I'll talk about that more in the spoiler section about spoilery reasons why I don't like him, but he is awful. He's probably on my list of worst literary villains ever. He's just complete and total scum. And one of the other characters is his assistant, I guess, the mooch, Lush, Mr. Lush. Mr. Lush basically lives off Grandcourt, and he is a complete mooch, and he is very he's just not nice. He's very creepy, and he's 100% devoted to himself. So yeah, really don't like Lush either. And then the last character, actually the last character I have to talk about in the spoiler section, because if I talk about her here, it will be a spoiler, as to who she is. But, she's a relation to a certain character in the book. There's a woman who comes in towards the end who is a relation of someone in the book, and I really, really, really don't like her. Yep, I can't say more except in the spoiler section, so if you've read this, then keep watching, but if not, I can't talk about her, sorry. And then characters that I really loved, I completely loved Daniel and Mira and Mordecai. Those three characters were my complete favorites. I love them so much. And really I have to talk about why for most of them in the spoiler section, but just in general, they all have really, really good hearts and souls, and Daniel is one of the most genuinely good characters that I've ever read in a book. He quite reminds me of Nicholas Nickleby from Charles Dickens in that way, and I think maybe Alysia was the first one who actually like compared those two, and like that's why I started thinking of him that way. But yeah, I just really love his character, and that's the other character that he reminds me of. And Mira, same thing. She is incredibly sweet and kind-hearted, and gracious, and yeah, she's just a wonderful character. And Mordecai is just, oh my gosh, again, like, I have to talk about him mostly in the spoiler section, but I guess non-spoilery, he's just incredibly spiritual, and he's like the deepest character in the whole story, and he's very kind, and yeah, I just really, really love his character. And then other characters that I quite liked are Herr Klezma and Miss Arrowpoint. Those two are just some genuinely good, sweet people, and in Herr Klezma's case, he's also incredibly talented because he's a pianist. And again, got to talk about their situation more in the spoiler section, but yeah, I just overall quite liked them as well. So yes, that's talking about all the characters. And now you have to go if you have not read the book. But basically, just read it and then watch the early 2000s adaptation, because it was wonderful. I just had like a couple slight issues with it. But aside from that, it was fantastic. So I very highly recommend this book and the TV adaptation. And then now, spoilers! So go away if you haven't read it. If you have, please stay. But yeah, so Daniel, I just really, really love him, and I think he's wonderful. And really, I don't have any spoilery things to say about his character aside from the fact that I just completely love him. And okay, I guess I will really quickly talk about the whole love square between Hans and Mira and Daniel and Gwendolyn. And then I guess really if you include Grandcourt, but I don't include him because there's no love at all. Like, I mean, he's married to Gwendolyn, but it doesn't mean squat as far as, like, the love goes. So, yeah, I'm gonna call it a love square, and Grandcourt's just gonna be over on the side. But, I just, I really, like, that's the one problem that I had with Hans, is his reaction to Daniel and Mira loving each other, because he thinks that, like, he creates this assumption in his head where he's like, oh, you know, Daniel likes this Duchess, Gwendolyn, so then he also has a thing for Mira, and Mira has a thing for him, so he basically wants to have his cake and eat it too, and he's gonna hurt Mira, and I don't like him. And I was like, dude, that's your best friend, like, maybe talk to him a little bit and figure out how he feels about people before you make all these assumptions and then just yell in his face. Like, that would be great. And I think, like, this is another thing that the adaptation did differently. It's a lot less angry, I guess, in the book. In the TV adaptation, I really, really didn't like Hans at the end, because his reaction to Daniel was literally like yelling at him, and he was like, I hate you, and not hate, that's too strong, but he was very mad at Daniel in the end, and that just bothered me. And then another thing about the love square that bothered me as far as the adaptation goes is the thing with Daniel and Gwendolyn. In the adaptation, it really makes you believe that Daniel could very well end up with either Gwendolyn or Mira. And there's really, in the book, and you know, this could just be me, in the book, I really didn't see that strong of a connection and love. I mean, I saw a very strong connection, but maybe just not that strong of a love connection between Gwendolyn and Daniel. I really just saw it from Daniel's point of view as, like, from Gwendolyn, you can tell that she really loves him, or that she's falling in love with him because he's so good and kind, and that she wants to not only get away from Grandcourt, but then she wants to be with Daniel if she can get away from Grandcourt. I feel like you definitely do see that in the book. But in the book with Daniel, I really didn't see him returning that much. I just, there are scenes in the adaptation where they almost kiss in the TV adaptation, and that just didn't sit right with me because I was like, I really don't think that he is that romantically interested in her. I feel like he deeply cares for her, like, a lot, and that he wants to help her out of this horrible situation because he's such a good, sweet person. And when he sees someone in danger, especially someone that he's grown to care for, he wants to help them out of it. But with her, I mean, I definitely didn't feel like that's something he would do for anybody. Yeah, I did, but not, I don't know what I'm saying right now, but basically, it didn't seem like that much of a love connection on his part in the book. But in the adaptation, they make it so they almost kiss, like, several times, and that really angered me, not only because I didn't feel like Daniel didn't feel that strongly, but also because I feel like he's such a good character, he's so honorable, that I don't think he would ever have kissed Gwendolyn while she was married to Grandcourt. That really bugged me. So yeah, didn't care for that much. Except that's really the only part of the adaptation. That and the fact that they toned down Herr Klezmer and Miss Arrowpoint's parts, and that they make Hans overreact so much to Daniel and Mira. Those were really the only three parts that I thought the adaptation blew way out of proportion, or in the case of Herr Klezmer and Miss Arrowpoint, made into this minuscule, like, 30-second plot point. It was literally 30 seconds. Like, it was like, Herr Klezmer was like, oh, hey, Miss Arrowpoint loves me and we're getting married, and then that's done. And I was like, no, we get a whole chapter and we, like, see how you guys feel about each other, and I don't feel like we got that at all in the adaptation. And granted, it is a small point in the book, like, to the point where it's only, like, a chapter or two, but it was, to me, it was a pretty big secondary plot point, and it was more important, or important enough that it shouldn't have just had, like, a 30-second mention. But anyway, I loved their love story so much, and I loved the part in the book. There's a part in the book where it gets compared to Abelard and Heloise's love story, and unfortunately, given that I've been talking for 22 minutes, I don't have time to explain that love story if you don't know it, but Google it, because it's incredibly sad, but also, like, tragically beautiful. And anyway, so when their love story gets compared to Heloise and Abelard, I was like, this is just, that's really, really beautiful, but I really, really hope that it has a different ending, because that ending was just, no. But yeah, so I really like them, and again, only parts I had issues with the adaptation. Otherwise, the adaptation was glorious. I loved the acting, I loved Hugh Dancy and Hugh Bonneville. The only thing about Hugh Bonneville, I will say, and this is probably just me, I have seen him in so many good guy roles before I've seen him in this, like, this is the only evil role I've ever seen him in, and he is so evil in this role. But it got to the point where, because I've seen him in so many good guy roles, I didn't believe, like, there were some parts where it was supposed to be incredibly sinister and dangerous between Gwendolyn and Grandcourt, and I did not really believe that on his part. I did not believe that he was super, super dangerous. But it's because I've seen him in so many good guy roles. Although I will say he's very good at crazy eyes, like crazy anger eyes. But that just wasn't enough for me, I guess. But again, it was probably just me, because I've seen him in so many good things. Yeah, I thought the acting was beautiful. The cast was fantastic. I loved making all these different connections, like the fact that Jodie May, who plays Mira, and Romola Garai, who plays Gwendolyn, ended up being in Emma together in 2009. But anyway, so yeah, completely just loved the acting. And other plot points that I want to talk about, just from the book, I guess. I just really, really love Daniel and Mira's love story was beautiful to me, and it was perfect. And that's the thing, like, that was the difference to me between, like, when you see Daniel with Gwendolyn and Daniel with Mira in the book. It just seemed like he had so much of a stronger, deeper connection with Mira, that definitely was romantic, whereas with Gwendolyn, it just never seemed that romantic on his part to me. So yeah, I just really loved the love story between Mira and Daniel. And I loved Mordecai and how he treated Daniel and how he loved Daniel like a brother from the very beginning, because one of the things that I wanted to talk about in this spoilery section is that I love that one of the coolest things about Mordecai is that he's practically prophetic, in his knowledge, just like in his intuition, that he feels like he knew that Daniel was Jewish from the very start, even when Daniel was like, oh no, I'm English, I've been raised English, I don't know my parents, but I don't think either one of them were Jewish, when in fact later he finds out both of them were, and he just immediately loves Daniel like a brother from the beginning, and, you know, it's before he even knows that Daniel is in love with his sister, and before he even finds his sister again. And by the way, that scene, I saw that scene in the, I don't know if I saw it in the adaptation or read it in the book first, but either way, that scene between Mira and Mordecai, aka Ezra, which, by the way, I love both of those names, actually all three of those names, but yeah, when they reunited, I cried both times. I cried in the book and I cried in the adaptation. It was one of the most beautiful scenes ever. So yeah, I really loved Mordecai and Mira and Daniel. And I really hated Daniel's mother. I thought she was incredibly selfish, and like I understood a couple of her points of view, but not her actions due to those points of view. Like, she 100% only cared about herself, and that really, really, really bothered me, like, a lot. Like, that every time they met in the book and in the adaptation, I was, like, cringing, practically. Yeah, it just, nope, didn't like her. And what else? Did I talk about spoilery, did I talk about all the spoilery character things? I think I have. I've talked about Herr Klezmer and I just, like, hated Grandcourt. Oh, and the other thing, I love, how Grandcourt dies, and the fact that, like, when I first saw that in the adaptation, I completely thought that Gwendolyn had murdered him, and I was like, oh crap, she's gonna hang, this is gonna be terrible, I don't want to see this. And then when you find out via a flashback in the adaptation, and then also, I believe, a flashback in the book as well, that she just feels really guilty and that it actually wasn't her fault at all, I was very, very happy with that. I was like, oh yay, okay, good, so she'll be fine. And yeah, so I was very happy with the way that he died, because he needed to. If he hadn't, and I think I already knew, based on another review that I saw of this book, that he was going to be the one to die. The person who reviewed it didn't say that he was the one to die, but she did say there was a major death, and as soon as she said that, I knew that it was going to be him. So yeah, I was perfectly happy with that. And I just really, really loved the end. I loved that Daniel and Mira ended up together, instead of him and Gwendolyn, because I just feel like Gwendolyn needed to be on her own, like, just with her family, because I feel like she needed to heal from Grandcourt and not heal by, like, immediately getting involved with somebody else, and also I really do believe that Daniel and Mira loved each other, very deeply, so I thought that they should get married. And also, that Gwendolyn could then, kind of, like, go back to her family now that she appreciates them so much more than she did. before she married Grandcourt. So yeah, that's kind of how I feel about all the characters and the adaptation. And I'm sorry that I said I wanted this to be shorter than 25 minutes, and it was 30 minutes. But hopefully, if you haven't read this, you left at the 15 or 16 minute point, so you didn't have to watch it long. But if you have seen this or read this and seen the adaptation and you stayed for this long, thank you. I hope you grabbed tea and a snack. But anyway, I just really, really, really cannot say enough how much I loved this book, and how much I really loved the adaptation, and this is going to be in my favorite classics of all time, probably for a long time. So thank you so much for watching.